trajectory of emissions across Ontario, across North America. Again, thank you to our sponsors listed again in number 2, and thank you to Amandeep and his team at Analyte for pulling the data together, pulling the information together to make this possible. So next slide, please. So we've got 5 key areas we want to go through. So we're talking about the context for collaboration. So the core story is, and everybody will have a different response to this, is other things that colleges with a bit of facilitation can do together beyond what you're already doing individually. So you'll see some of these results. Colleges are working hard in this space already. Is there a case for collaboration, and what's that context? And if so, how do you get involved? But mostly we wanted to share a sense of urgency that, as it says, the clock is ticking. We're going in the wrong direction in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. 2030 is coming really quickly, and we're going to argue the case for your consideration that effectively using energy data is the only way across tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of buildings to be able to identify the right things to do, verify they're working properly, and move forward in a systematic way that will help us to meet the targets that have been set. We're going to share with you oh, that's interesting. I wonder where number 2 went. So anyway, so we'll share with you the ranking of the top performing colleges for this year's report, and which year that relates to. It's the BPS data that we're using to report that. Then we want to talk a bit about where do we go from here. Your 2024 ECDM plan is coming up next year. So what does that need to look like to be more impactful than province-wide the plans have been in the past? So the energy conservation plans are very much transitioning from a check the box thing. It's what the government told me to do, to we all individually and collectively need a plan for moving towards the targets that have been set in a very strategic and thoughtful manner. And as always, we're delighted to have a number of leading colleges to join a panel discussion to let's talk about some of the issues and give you a chance to ask questions of them. And we have a poll towards the end of so you can give us feedback on what matters the most to you, and we will govern ourselves accordingly. So these are the things we'd like to get through. Next slide, please. So the post-secondary climate challenge, if you haven't been following the story since the beginning of last year, is collaborative, bringing together colleges and universities as a community of practice, as a community of interest. And again, the fundamental premise is, can we do things collectively? Can we avoid reinventing wheels more effectively than we can do them individually? There is urgency, there's a lot to be done, and if we can help each other, that's a positive thing to do. I'm Ian Jarvis, the Executive Director of Climate Challenge Network, and I have the overall responsibility and serve as the spokesperson for the initiative at this point in time. Next slide, please. So this is a visual that we really want to leave everybody with today. The blue curve here is the Government of Canada's plan. This is the official plan for emissions reductions associated with buildings leading up to 2030, by which time the plan, which fits together into meeting our national targets, which are integrated into international targets. So there's a lot of dominoes in play here, is looking for a 41% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from buildings, not just colleges, from all big buildings, hospitals, schools, retail, office buildings, and so on. 41% by 2030. We're already well into this. The red dotted line is Enbridge Gas's current growth plan for or trajectory or forecast for gas consumption requirements, and it's an empirical model. This is what's happening out there. So their mandate is to make sure we keep buildings heated during the winter time. So they're responding to what the market is requiring for them. So they're seeing a 1% annual growth. Canada, and by extension, Ontario and the other provinces, are looking for a 41% reduction. That is a big gap, and it's growing every year, and we're still trending in the wrong direction. So collectively, we're still trending in the wrong direction, and that's across all building sectors. So this is go to the next slide, please, because this is kind of a timely time. There's a lot going on right now. We're in the midst of the ISO ECDM plan that comes to an end in next year in 2024. There'll be a new one coming. We're in the midst of Enbridge's 3-year plan from 2023 to 2025. There'll be a new one coming in 2026. You're all charged with putting your ECDM plans together for July the 1st of next year. That will take us up to 2029, which is pretty darn close to 2030. And all of these you can expect are going to be increasingly aggressive about what we have to accomplish, and increasingly looking for everybody's participation and help in bending this curve. So all of our planning today has to have a sense of urgency around it, has to have a sense that we're going in the wrong direction right now. So we not only got to flatten the curve, we got to bend it into the right direction to where we need to go. So again, visually, there's a lot happening. There's a lot of planning. We're very conscious of how busy all the colleges are, same as all the hospitals, same as all the school boards. And we've got to get this done in addition to what we're already doing. Again, the argument today is other things we can do together that will make it more effective and more efficient than doing them individually. But this is an important visual. Next slide, please. So again, the premise for everybody's consideration is there are just too many buildings, too many mechanical rooms, too much space, too much funding, too much training. There's too much to do to just try to work our way through the whole thing step by step. That our best path forward, and perhaps the only path forward, is using data to show the way. And the post-secondary climate challenge is built around the premise that if we can extract more and more useful information out of readily available data and share that with you, you can do a better job. You can direct your efforts in the most productive areas and verify the fact that things are working, and more importantly, then share with each other what's successful or what's not, so you can steal shamelessly from each other all the best ideas and work your way through. Ontario has a special advantage. The BPS reporting data is one of very few jurisdictions in North America that have publicly available data. Amandeep and his team, they're in the business of processing that information and turning it public facing, making it useful to provide, again, meaningful direction as to what should we be doing, how should we do it, and is it working? Next slide, please. So you already report college information. And what I'll tell you from our first 1.5 year experience with the post-secondary climate challenge is, just like every other sector, there is value in everybody focusing on making their information they provide as good as it can be. So we're finding, as we dig deep and find anomalies, different colleges coming back with, oh, sorry, my building area is wrong, or I didn't really pay too much attention to the allocation of space types. We use all of this information to help give you meaningful feedback. And so if you want to put a little to-do note, one of those things that's going to be the ongoing theme over the next 1 or 2 years is going to be cleaning up the data. Let's just make sure our data is as reliable as it can be. Then we're also looking at the utilities, saying, make sure the data that they provide to you is as realistic and accurate as it can be, because we're relying on those data to point us in the right direction. So this is the information we're working with. We're not sure it's 100% correct, but it works to where we're going so far. Next slide, please. And just want to put if you like, a fence, not a fence, because it's more meaningful than this, but and fences, I think these days we're going to have to jump some of them, but just the scope of data that we're talking about. We believe most of you do, and all of you must have functional energy management information systems, a functional EMIS that gives you meaningful, useful reports. And it should incorporate monthly data, obviously the billing data, interval data, which is mostly and increasingly available, and sub-meter data where you have it. So the idea, data is important. Having a functioning management system, not just a bunch of meters, but a management system that turns energy data into meaningful information that points you in the right direction is key. but it's only a piece of the equation. HVAC testing is fundamental. If you aren't already in the process of having your air handling systems and your pumping systems tested to make sure they're functioning the way they should, they're either in balance or not, that they're doing the right things, that's fundamental. Your building automation system is going to be your best friend, and you can't get there without it. So having your building automation system updated, being able to process and analyze trend logs over periods, looking back over the last cooling season, the last heating season, is going to be fundamental. And increasingly, we are coming up, because you're sharing those data with us, we're coming up with standards and metrics. Those are informing new building codes. There'll be energy codes emerging that the federal government's working on, the model national codes the provinces will be adopting. So this world, given the urgency, is going to be changing fairly quickly. Data is the pathway to low carbon operations. And if you like, this is the scope of the things that you should be considering. I love that curve at the bottom. These are our current members, the campuses of our current members, showing the electricity daily usage over a 4-week period in October. And you can see how wildly different they are. Every one of those curves tells a story and points towards savings opportunities. Next slide, please. And learning from the data, Danielle, I know that that Natalie was running through this yesterday, but maybe you just validate my understanding. So this is really simple stuff. This is what the college is taking part in the post-secondary climate challenge are getting right now. So the red dotted line is the baseline. The blue dotted line is what's happened since the beginning of COVID after normalizing for weather. So interestingly, here you can see the big drop in electricity consumption, the blue dot for the Welland campus before just when COVID began. And then it's slowly been creeping up, and now it's just about back to normal, back to where we were before. And every college looks different through this. But with Niagara on the Lake, and we're aware of hybrid models and not everybody came back and so on. Niagara on the Lake, a very different kind of profile where it stayed lower. And Danielle, are you able to kind of share a couple of thoughts? Does this make sense to you? Is Welland almost back to normal, whatever normal is, and something different happened at Niagara on the Lake?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of program delivery, we are back to normal. We are at a high occupancy rate for our programs at both campuses. Where you see the difference with Niagara on the Lake, maintaining a lower electrical consumption can be attributed to some of the projects that were completed between 2019 to the present. So one of those that really attributes to most of it is a large-scale lighting retrofit project that was started then. It was started actually prior to 2019, but a large portion, and it was completed within the pandemic timeframe. So that allows us to, drop down our peak demand as well as our overall consumption, which has been really great to see, especially when you show something like this of, we went through a pandemic, we had lower occupancy, and in doing those projects in that time frame, we haven't really gone back up to that pre-pandemic consumption level. So it does make sense, and it's really great to see that.
Yeah, Danielle, did the pandemic help at all? Was it easier or harder to get the lighting retrofit done during the pandemic period? There were less people there, but did the pandemic get in the way?
Initially, we had put a hold on all kind of project work for the first few months until probably springtime. And then also initially our budgets kind of got halted. However, since the pandemic was longer than any of us really expected, having fewer people and classrooms not as occupied did allow for it to get kind of implemented quicker than it would have otherwise, which was a bonus.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide and look at your gas consumption just to, and this is more to give people, we're not trying to do a deep dive here, just give people a flavor of the data really matter. And being on top of them is really important because stuff is going on all the time and your utility meters are really vigilant. They're always watching to see what's going on. So looking at this, and again, I won't ask you to comment on this, Danielle, because I think it's more illustrative than than specific, but we can see that the first year of COVID, the following winter, gas consumption came down significantly. So once again, the red lines are the weather normalized baseline, and everybody remembers that was a really cold winter. And the blue dots are the actual monthly consumption. You had slightly lower consumption in the 21-22 winter during the cold weather. And for whatever reason, gas went up this year. And those are the conversations we're having now about what could have caused that in the most recent year. So there'll be positives and negatives emerging out of COVID when we see how the energy kind of stabilizes and normalizes itself. And looking at Niagara on the lake, you did a great job, I think, of flagging the fact you've got sub-metering on some of your bigger process loads there, especially the brewery. We all like the brewery.
Of course.
That demonstrated quite clearly, and so sub-metering is helpful, that the Enbridge billing has gone awry somewhere in that period. So there's always stuff going on here. I think our message to you, again, for your consideration is this stuff matters. We need to be on top of this every month. That blue dot has a story to tell, and we need to be listening and understanding it and responding to it. So the case for data, I rest my case for now, but the next slide. So you'll be wondering how we do our analytics. I'm not going to try to present it here, but when we report on actual savings from the BPS reported data, when we do our rankings, when we set energy targets, that whole methodology is published. It's on our website. You can go find it. It's open to everybody on exactly what that methodology is. We know there are a number of you that kind of like the data stuff, and as we do. So would love to get your feedback on, have you thought about normalizing this way or adjusting for this? But we're pretty confident that this is a meaningful and reliable evaluation, if you like, of the energy performance and the actual results from colleges across the province. But the white paper is there for you to review. Next slide, please. And the principles of setting targets for us, again, they're defined within the white paper, but we've established top quartile targets. So the idea is if everybody was as good as the top 25% in electricity use and in gas use, then that's what the targets are. If we get everybody to that top quartile level, that's what the savings would be. And we consider that to be just good practice. If we run what we've already got efficiently without spending a ton of money, if we just run what we've got efficiently, that's the level of savings we can achieve. That gets us a long way to that gap that we were looking at back at the beginning here today. So for every one of you, the targets are adjusted to your closest weather station for each individual campus. Then savings potential is the difference between the target and your actual usage from year to year. Then we roll the whole thing up and pull together this report for consideration by everybody. And we're confident in recognizing the most efficient colleges and the most improved colleges at this point in time. But again, methodology there in the white paper, please take a look if you're interested, and we'd love your feedback. Next slide, please. So this is where it's much more fun doing it in person, but this is where the virtual, it looks like Algonquin would like to know their code, and I know that Carolyn will be getting back to you on that. So I say virtual drum roll here. We did this last year, and if the recording is still up on our website, so if you want to see who are the winners, and I think they are winners, and they're winning on behalf of all of us, not just individually. But here are the rankings using the 2020 calendar year data as reported by you to the BPS reporting system for the Ministry of Energy. So the next slide. So again, this is where you need to know your codes. So Algonquin just asked for theirs, and they will be positioned within this. So this is the 2020 total energy benchmark. It's just simple what you look at all the time, I'm sure, kilowatt hours per square foot, and with thermal energy, mostly natural gas equivalent kilowatt hours per square foot. So the blue is the electricity, the green is the thermal energy. This is not weather normalized. We have marked where by your own designations, the way the colleges self-designate, which of these are small, medium, and large. I will say that even on this chart, the northern colleges are fairly evenly distributed through here. There's some are very high, some are medium, some are low. So you think the weather had a big effect. So there's enough inefficiency in all facilities right now, and colleges are better than most, by the way. There's enough inefficiency there that things you'd expect, like age of buildings and weather, they don't show up as being material factors right now. They will in future, but right now, everybody's got lots of room to improve. But here's the rank. This is not how we rank you. This is just your absolute energy use. Then we apply our targets. So the next slide, please, Natalie. So this is how we've ranked you. It's got a mind of its own, hasn't it? Just keeps wanting to get ahead. So right now, so this is the savings potential comparing your actual energy use with your weather normalized, space adjusted target. So to the extent that the methodology is clean, is straightforward enough, then this is the picture that emerges. So college 8, college 16, college 5, college 1, college 12. These are our most efficient. What we're showing here is their remaining savings potential. So you can see even the ones closer to the top, the first, so the 2, 3, and 4, and 5, most of their remaining savings potential is in gas. College 10, most of the savings potential is in electricity. So even this points you in the direction of which systems should you be looking at, which ones should you focus on. But this is the derivative of applying rational targets to your actual energy use, adjusting for weather and other variables, and ending up with, these are our top performers, and these are the ones we want to learn from, and the colleges towards the bottom of this chart are the ones that we'd like to find ways collaboratively to help move forward so we all get to that 41% reduction finishing line. You see the overall score there. There are only 21 colleges reporting on this particular report. There are either data errors or no data at all. With others, you see the target savings. So on thermal energy, it's around 27%. On greenhouse gas emissions, it's around 26%. These are big numbers. There's $11.7 million a year of utility cost savings for everybody to get to be as good as the top quartile. Not to be perfect, but that's what the numbers shake out at. Every building sector we've looked at is kind of between 27 is about the best potential, and 32, 33. We've adopted the idea of 30 by 30. If everybody can get behind the idea of let's reduce all the colleges collectively, with the less efficient ones contributing more. If we can get everybody down by 30% by 2030, we get pretty darn close to what the government's committed to. Now we're on track for 2040 and 2050. But this is a big deal. This is the information we share with the Ontario Energy Board, with Enbridge, with the ISO, with the Ministry of Energy, with the federal government. This is the opportunity for Ontario's colleges just to get good, knowing that a number of you are already pretty good. So I hope that makes sense, but this is where the rankings come from. The next slide, please. And now's the drum roll. So the energy reductions, we wanted to start there. So we've given you the rankings, and we'll show you how that plays out, who the top performing colleges are. This is another really important chart for us to visualize going forward. These are called tornado diagrams, and this is showing what happened to electricity use in the middle, gas use on the right, and total energy on the left between calendar year 2020 compared to 2019, having adjusted for weather. So a moment ago, we were looking at your rankings, which were the most efficient colleges based on 2020 data. This is what happened between 2019 and 2020. And these are the colleges that had the biggest savings. This is the best. Again, colleges are doing very well. Colleges did better than any other sector we've looked at here to this point: hospitals, office buildings, schools, and so on. What this is saying is the most improved electric college in 2020 versus 2019 was College 17, which had 32% electricity reduction. And you can look across to the gas. I can't quite see it because I've got that nice picture of seeing everybody's faces on the side there. But College 9 was the biggest thermal energy savings. There are a few colleges where the gas went up. Most of the colleges made electricity reductions in 2020 versus 2019 because it's pre and post COVID and you were shutting the campuses down. It's even more interesting next year to look at 2021 versus 2020 as we saw with Danielle, how is this coming back to life? What does the new normal look like going forward? But the most improved colleges, there we have named the top 4. We always recognize the best and let everybody else know where they stand. So Georgian College showed the biggest savings over that period of time. We're having great conversations now with Jessica about what did you do? Because we want to write a case study and share it with everybody. But Niagara College, congratulations, Danielle, coming in second, and Mohawk and Humber. We'd like to think it's not coincidental that our 3 member colleges are in this top group in terms of savings. And we don't think it's because you're members of Post-Secondary Climate Challenge. We think it's because you joined Post-Secondary Climate Challenge because you are that aware and you are on top of things. And that's why you show up at the top of here, but lots to learn from the members going in. But this is a big deal. And as I say, every year we'll be presenting these tornado charts showing how are we doing year to year. And again, letting everybody know so you can respond accordingly. Next slide, please. So from year to year, just want to remind everybody, if you were on this call last year, which was in the fall last year, but we're earlier this year, but from 2019 to versus 2018, we saw, so pre-COVID, we saw a 0.6% electricity reduction last year when we reported on this. We showed a 12% natural gas reduction, weather normalized, so year on year. And again, that is the best of all the building sectors that we're looking at. You can see there the number of colleges that made savings. This year we see 15.9% electricity, but it's not savings, it's a reduction. But again, some colleges responded more effectively to the new mandates, the new requirements of COVID, and during the closures than others. Natural gas didn't make much incremental improvement. And again, there's some thinking to be done about that as to what systems were we setting back or shutting down, how. But this is a trend, again, we'll track every year. We'll be back next year to talk about 2021 versus 2020. And having looked at some of the schools' data, that is going to be equally interesting, shall we say. So these trends over year is how the colleges do and should hold themselves accountable for year-on-year progress, not some distant target in the future. These year-on-year results really matter and they can be inspiring to other groups. Next slide, please. So third time with the drum roll. These are the top 5 colleges that we acknowledged in here. So Loyalist, the smallest, but again, making all the adjustments for that. And either we don't have the data or your energy use didn't change in 2020 versus 2019. But Conestoga, who we profiled in this event last year, Canada College was the 3rd most efficient. So these are the ones at the top of that savings potential chart. And Humber College has moved into the top 5, as has Seneca College. So congratulations to all of you. As of now, you are the most energy efficient colleges in Ontario. We then broke it into the 3 groupings of the small, medium, and large, which is your designations, not ours. And you can see who the top 3 were in each of those categories there. So we want to learn from all of you and package what you're doing and put it in a way that everybody can share it. And we really would like to help everybody else move up the charts to be in these groupings next year or the year after. So that's the way this works. So congratulations, and we're delighted to be able to report on your good work. Next slide, please. So that's where we're at. That's where we've come over the last 12 months working on this. And Now we want to talk a little bit about where do we go from here, and particularly in the context that your energy conservation demand management plans are due next year. I'm sure you're all starting working on them right now. And we're going to argue the case as clearly as we can. They need to be very different than the plans everybody's produced in the past. They're no longer just a shopping list of here's all the things we'd like to do if and when we make money, have any money to do it. And this is our target savings. That's the easy part. So we'll run through this as to what we're suggesting, again, for your consideration, that you want to include in the plan this year that you may not have done 5 years ago. So the next slide, please. And then we're going to have a great conversation with our panel who will share with us, does this make any sense and what are you going to do with it? So we're going to talk about the easier part. So the easier part is what has to get done to make all of this work. And it really isn't that complicated. It's hard work, but it's not that complicated. So everybody's going to put in place energy efficiency improvements. You're going to schedule all the systems. You're going to test and rebalance handling systems. You're going to upgrade your boilers and your building automation systems. You're going to improve your operations and maintenance practices. You're going to do cost-effective retrofits and should be able to readily find funding. To do that, we would argue you're going to add sub-metering, and that's one of the areas where we hope we can share best practices among the colleges. You also take a look at net zero capital planning. So if we get the energy efficiency piece right and we're doing forward planning well and not making any bad decisions, that every infrastructure project is an opportunity to move a step towards the low carbon future. You'll be looking at new building construction, and we're taking a lot of interest in buildings built over the last 10 or 15 years. How efficient are they compared to ones before? What can we learn? But infrastructure renewal is seen differently. The capital planning has to have the low carbon lens, and we get out of the area of like for like. Expect new codes and standards to be coming on a fairly regular basis, and we'll be producing some of those. We'll be looking at the top performing colleges, measuring systems within them and sharing that information. What's the watts per CFM or the BTUs per square foot, whatever those numbers should be. You'll be converting heating systems. So every time a heating system is at the end of life, you'll think about what's the future. You're going to be installing a lot of heat pumps, air source heat pumps, heat recovery chillers, some geothermal, all of it's in there, and you'll be upgrading building envelopes. So the stuff on the right, you know how to do this. It's a lot of hard work. It's going to take time. The stuff on the left, we know how to do that. It's how we get it done. So the harder part, we would argue for your ECDM plans. Next slide, please. No. And this is where, and some of you have real strengths in some of these areas that we know of, and some of you may not. And we suspect the bigger correlation between the colleges at the top of the benchmark chart and the ones at the bottom are found here. It's not that you've done less of the stuff that needs to be done, it's within this area. So it's what gets in the way. And we're going to have a poll later to ask you that question. At the governance level, are your boards, are your executive, are they committed to this? Are there clear goals and accountability within your college? And we're suggesting these are things you should address in your new vintage ECDM plan. Time and money, it's always cited as the issue. We haven't got enough time and we haven't got enough money to save $1 million a year. There's a business case. Where do we find the resources? Organizational alignment is critical. Is everybody on the same page? Is procurement and finance and facilities and capital planning and all those players from the CEO down, are they all on the same page with respect to where they're going? Do their KPIs align with the low carbon future with sustainability? And probably more importantly, in where post-secondary climate challenge, the reason we created this in the first place was around to advance knowledge. So best practices guides, everybody's doing things the best they can. When we bring it all together, what does best practice look like? Service contractors having architects, engineers, mechanical contractors, building automation contractors, well-informed, testing their knowledge before you cut them loose on your plant and equipment, requiring them to improve their service in a knowledgeable way. and just building this whole continuous feedback and learning process into everything that you do. So there's always that loop. We did it, man, we made a lot of improvements there. We'll keep doing it and we'll do it better. So suggestion for, again, I keep saying this, but for your consideration, we don't pretend to know everything, but our experience says these are the things you need to be addressing in your ECDM plan next year. They're far more important than the technical stuff. If you get this right, everything else will fall into place and take care of itself. Next slide, please. So working together, the case for collaboration. Next slide. And we're post-secondary climate challenges emerging with kind of two pieces there. One is data-driven planning, as we think we can help tease out the important data to point people in the right direction, tell them when they're doing a good job, capture the case studies, the examples, and weave them all together. So data-driven planning, and we'll be looking at building automation system applications, sub-meter data. We're working now with Enbridge to look at getting more gas interval data in, because you can learn a lot from that. So data-driven planning to help make the business case for action and make sure we do the right things and we do them right. But also cohort projects. There are gaps in knowledge that we can fill together. The ones our current members have flagged as being of interest that we're looking to resource right now, the nighttime electricity hunt. Do you remember a while ago I showed you the interval meter charts? And a lot of electricity gets used in the middle of the night when nobody's there. So we're working our way through that. The big project we're planning at the moment is building automation and ventilation recommissioning. We'll be studying recently built buildings to see which are working best. So these are the kind of areas where we can work together on projects with industry, with experts to make things happen. And the next slide, please. So let's get to the panel, and I'm always so grateful to everybody who's busy, and Aman, Danielle, and Steve taking time out to do a little bit more. And if you could all kind of switch your microphones on, and let's get through some of the conversation about how are you doing what you're doing. You'll note again, all three of these were at the top of the energy reduction charts. And Aman, if I may, could you just give us a couple of sentences about where Humber College fits within all of this, and what have you learned coming out of the pandemic that's going to stay with you, that's going to help Humber move forward on a go forward basis?
Yeah, for sure, Ian. Thank you. So in terms of what we did during COVID, I would say most of our response was anchored around the core recommendations that were out from ASHRAE. They had a guidance document on COVID-19. And mostly it was around making sure we had good filtration, MERV 13 where possible, and then meeting the minimum ASHRAE 62 ventilation rates. Well, one thing we did not do was pre and post occupancy flushing. And I think the main reason for us was, our occupancy was significantly down, right, as everybody's was. And we have a lot of airside free cooling economizers in most of our areas. So we were thinking we were over ventilating anyway, so we didn't need to go there. So this meant that our energy use didn't go up from the flushing. And I know other colleges did do the flushing, and it was completely reasonable, a reasonable strategy, but we just didn't do it. So that helped not make our energy use worse.
Yep.
Another thing we did was we invested a lot in automation, kind of in the years leading up to the pandemic. So this is a BAS and lighting controls, right? And so because of that, we were able to ramp things down automatically without really having to do a lot manually. So I'll give you a really good example. We integrated our occupancy sensors from the lighting control system with our BAS. And so when there's no people in the space, not only do the lights turn off, but the zones go into setback on the BAS, right? So the VAV dampers close, the air handler fans ramp down, heating coil valves close, right? We reduce our heating and cooling loads, boilers and chillers ramp down. but we don't really have to do anything, right? It all kind of happened automatically because we put that effort in up front, automating everything and putting those sequences in place. So I think that was probably the main thing that was driving our savings.
That's really helpful. Danielle, we've touched a little bit on what you've been up to at Welland and Niagara on the Lake, but similar question. Can you give us a bit of a sense, because you weren't on the panel last year, about Niagara's approach to all of this sustainability stuff, and again, what was happening during COVID, even though you were away for part of that time, aren't you?
Yes, I was away summer 2021 until just this past March. So in advance of the pandemic, we also put a lot of effort into getting lighting control. We don't have kind of a central system, and it's currently not tied into our BAS like Aman was talking about, but we do have occupancy sensors, which was really great for when the pandemic happened, because automatically lights weren't on if people weren't in spaces. The next step, which we didn't unfortunately get to in time for the pandemic, is to tie that into building automation to ramp down the HVAC and put those areas into unoccupied and have those setbacks done automatically. During the pandemic, especially as we were seeing, there weren't really night courses, and classes weren't occupied as they were beforehand. Just to touch back on, the lighting. So the first stage of it, we saw it as somewhat of a low-hanging fruit, somewhat of a easy, quote unquote, project to implement, was introducing the controls, to only have it lit when we need it to be lit. And then increasing the efficiency of what we had. So we did a large, wide-scale relamping project. And as we saw with the data, because that was all completed kind of in and around the start of the pandemic or just before and finished during, and that included exterior light, we continue to see those savings. And those are sustained savings, which is also really great. The other thing that we had started to do was a large scale kind of BAS upgrade to make sure that our controllers were capable of doing some of the things that we wanted to do in the future. Which is sort of kind of a looking ahead approach that we have now. However, during COVID, one of the things that we knew we needed to do as the pandemic, wasn't a 2-week long break as it started out to be, was to go off the schedule to adjust the occupancy schedules for rooms and areas based on what the scheduling were, because previously most of the classrooms were occupied throughout the day from 8 in the morning until 10 at night, whereas kind of term by term we made those adjustments. Kind of a labor intensive, so the goal moving forward is to utilize those upgrades in BAS controllers to have that as an automatic process, integrating the occupancy control with it.
That's there's a common theme emerging here, and I got a feeling I'm going to hear the same from you, Steve. You have a history with building automation. Same question to you.
Yeah, so we did a lot of the similar things that Aman already just mentioned. A lot of our, I'm sure like everyone else, our capital projects were put on hold, so we shifted to more operational projects, trying to recommission systems, optimize the controls of systems that are on our BAS, which luckily the large majority of our building systems are centrally controlled. But so we actually utilize the ASHRAE guideline 36, if anyone's familiar with it. It's a high performance sequences of operation for HVAC systems, and they're the first draft of that included variable air volume systems, of which we have quite a few throughout our main campus. So we spent the lockdown implementing that programming per ASHRAE guideline 36, which, as Aman mentioned, essentially can ramp up or ramp down the delivered capacity from a supply temperature and supply pressure point of view to the zones it's feeding, based on whether the zone's required or not. So there's the integration of the occupancy sensors to both reduce the ventilation being delivered, set back temperature set points to what we call standby. They don't go to full unoccupied, they go just to a sort of intermediate step between our occupied and unoccupied set points so that the recovery period back to occupied isn't too long if and when occupancy comes back in those zones. But and then we were able to increase the efficiency of our central hot water plant by running our recently installed 1 megawatt electric resistance boiler
Right, yeah.
quite more than we were
Yeah.
using natural gas in the past. So those are the main things, but there's a lot of operational things, not so much capital, of which we're getting back into. And now we're dealing obviously with long lead times and supply chain issues on those projects.
Right, right. So let's, I'm going to skip the piece in the middle because the transition is taking care on its own. I want to go straight to looking forward, and we'll go in the same order, if I may. Your sense of the feasibility of a sharp turn, like what is it going to take to accelerate progress around emissions reductions to contribute to, I think the colleges again are doing already, I think, more than other sectors, but Emma, what are your feelings about what can the college sector individually and collectively do to really have a big impact, to really change the status quo?
Yeah, so I think we can get there. I think a lot of colleges have plans in place and they're doing things. So I can share what Humber's plan is, because I think we're planning to hit about that 40% by 2030. And it's 4 main strategies, I'd say. We're doing a lot of different things, but 4 key ones that I want to highlight. So one is the new construction. I think you mentioned it earlier too, Ian, like the new development. All new developments have to be zero carbon, right? We can't reduce our emissions if the new buildings are adding GHGs, right? That doesn't make any sense. And then similarly for capital projects, no more like for like, or trying to think very long term about what we're putting in now. So that's one. Number 2, building envelope retrofits. We're planning to do a building or 2 every year for the next 5 years. And we had been doing quite a few leading up to the pandemic. It's mostly driven by deferred maintenance, systems that are end of life. But while we're replacing cladding and windows, the newer stuff is higher performance, right? So triple pane glazing, more insulation, we're reducing thermal bridging, we're reducing infiltration. So that helps a lot. Number 3 is building optimization, right? So more on this theme that we've been talking about today, finding ways to get the buildings running more efficiently, better sequences, better scheduling. And then number 4, I think probably the most important is for decarbonization is electrifying our heating, right? So we have a big project that's just started construction called Project Switch at our main North Campus, where we're converting our central steam system to hot water, right, which lowers our supply temperatures for our heating. We're adding electric boilers for off-peak heating, very similar to what Steve was describing at Mohawk. Heat recovery chillers as well in the central plant that are going to recover waste heat from our cooling system. There's also a battery storage system that helps reduce our peaks, helps pay for the project. So this project alone is going to reduce emissions on the main campus by 40%. So when you add all this stuff together, we're pretty confident we can hit the 41% by 2030.
That's great to hear. I'm conscious I want to leave time here for the poll. So Danielle, can you, have you got a big highlight in a minute or less? Sorry to do this to you. I know I've talked too much today. To add to that as to where Niagara is going?
Yeah, no problem. I mean, similarly to what Aman is talking about, new construction is going to be very important to build to those standards of net zero. We did a tour of Humber's Passive House, and that was such an inspirational tour. And I think, what you've mentioned before of learning from each other, making sure we make these visits and help each other along the way so that we aren't inventing the wheel. So I mean, kind of the low-hanging fruit has kind of come to an end. Operationally, we need to recommission, rebalance our existing buildings, and then really do a focus on the building envelope, focusing on insulation and reducing the thermal bridges. that should lower the requirement for heat, and then changing out systems to be, more of the heat pump, electrifying that. And one other thing that, we want to introduce going forward as things electrify is on-site generation, implementing some solar as well. So yeah, I think we've kind of talked about all the other items, but that's, where we're going in the deep retrofits for insulation, building envelope, and then the new systems, yeah, using VRF, heat recovery, that sort of thing.
Great stuff. And Steve, and I just made an executive decision because conscious of people's time that we're going to switch the poll to a survey. Well, everybody who's on this call will send you hopefully a quick survey that you can fill in and give us your feedback on this to make time. But Steve, quickly, add to that mix. Where's Mohawk headed?
So in this current fiscal year, we're getting ready to tender for to install another 500 kilowatt electric boiler at our main campus. And then we're definitely, as you mentioned, our conservation and demand management plans due next year. So high focus is going to be this year on, as what you talked about, ensuring it's a more robust plan that's not just sort of a wish list that's maybe not going to come to fruition, but that's something that's been vetted and has buy-in from everybody and is something that can feasibly be done, with the required resources being considered as well. So, but yeah, building envelope is a big one for us too. We still have a lot of original 1967 envelopes that, are due for improvement. Always building automation upgrades, optimizations, adding sensing for data to make more informed decisions. Further to what Amon and I were talking about earlier, having the zones tell the systems that are serving them if and when they need more heating, more cooling, more ventilation, and if they don't, then they throttle back to a sort of standby position. But anyways, we've got our new, we're calling it climate action plan, being released later this year. So that's, obviously I've heard rumblings of what our target's going to be, but I'd obviously like to wait until that's officially released. But from what I hear, it's going to be a very aggressive target, and I really look forward to being part of the team that's going to help to drive progress towards it.
Yeah, they are exciting times, aren't they? So let's close out today and absolutely thank the three panelists. This is so, honestly, for everybody, it's so much more interesting listening to you than listening to me. So this has been great, and it's kind of real live, and colleges are actually doing this. So it's been extremely helpful. Thank you all. Next slide, please, Natalie. So the poll, as I say, we're going to turn that into a survey. Hope you'll make the time to give us quick feedback on what matters to you. These are some of the questions we'll be posing to you, and we'll try to make it easy to kind of check the boxes and fill in the numbers, and we will feed back to everybody then what the findings were. But let's keep moving on, Natalie, please. We're not going to do the poll now. Now, can we move on to the next slide? We're going to hold the poll. We're not going to do the poll. So next steps, and it's really that simple, is deeper into data, working with the colleges, member colleges, and on looking at what are the right retrofits, infrastructure, new buildings, looking at natural gas interval metering and what the learnings are that come out of that, and they're at least as interesting as electricity. We will be putting forward cohort projects that have a collective interest, and getting those prioritized, getting them funded, getting them delivered, and producing best practice guides. This is our best way to share knowledge, is to develop something, demonstrate it, and then put it out there for people to use. Stay tuned for events. We will be having a number of workshops and webinars over the course of the years often on specific subjects that won't interest everybody, but will interest some. And again, want to come back to join us if this all makes sense to other colleges on the line. We're thrilled with the 3 inaugural members that we have in Humber and Mohawk and Niagara. And we would welcome more companies. So it's a relatively straightforward process to join in. It's not particularly expensive, and become part of that movement that's going there. And finally, the last slide, Natalie. As you know where to find us. So Natalie Milan is our fearless, keeps me organized and everybody else, program manager. You can reach her at that email address. And Amandeep, who many of you know, is our director of engineering, working on pulling this together, driving the cohort projects and so on. So that's our story. We'll be, I'm sure we'll see many of you between now and then, but next year we'll produce the same kind of summary of how did we do last year, who's moved up the leaderboard, who's moved down the leaderboard, and what are these best practices? How can we work together, because we're 1 year closer to 2030. So once again, my sincere thanks to our panel, not only for taking the time today, but for the meetings we've had prior to today, getting ready for this. Thanks to Natalie for pulling everything together, and wish you all great progress on the need to get to where we're going in 2030. So thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Take care.